Welcome to DAX Machina. Join us as we explore the mysteries of this world. Cryptids, monsters, macabre tales, and horror stories abound. Could they be true? Are monsters real?
Good evening, folks, and thank you for joining us on another edition of DAX Machina. Joining me in the studio is Robbie Rip Rains. Doc is unavailable tonight. He is working his tail off trying to get orders done with Dark Angel, and Steve is out with his lovely wife tonight. So it'll just be me and Robbie in the studio. And joining us is a surprise guest, Greg Ogles. Greg is going to be joining us because we had kind of a last-minute change of plans. Unfortunately, Matt Emch was unable to join us tonight. Yeah, he's having some health issues. He had outpatient surgery yesterday and is having some complications. So he will be joining us at a later date. So y'all please keep Matt in your prayers. Hopefully he gets a speedy recovery. But as soon as he's up and around and feeling better, we're going to definitely schedule time, get him back on the show. But unfortunately, he was unable to be with us tonight. But we've got Greg. Greg's in the house, which is going to be awesome. We're going to be talking creepy stuff and cryptids and documentaries and everything in between. And I think it's going to be a good time. I hope you guys will have fun with it. So Greg, why don't you go ahead and take it away? Introduce yourself for those who may not know who you are, if they've been living under a rock, the last few years or so. But go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you do and where to find your work.
Thanks, DA. I appreciate you having me on. A little bit about me. I'm a filmmaker part-time, but, full-time, I am a traffic engineer. I work in the traffic engineering field. And I spent a lot of time investigating crashes and investigating traffic related incidences, and in doing so you're trained to use a variety of skills that's involved in pretty much any type of investigation. Once you learn to investigate it's all about the same. But a few years ago, in 2013, was turned on to the paranormal field. I've always been interested in it, but I was kind of looking for a diversion in my life. So I took up Bigfooting and bringing some of the skills from my background into Bigfooting. One of the main things you want to do in investigating is document what your findings are. And the best way for me to document is through video. So I started videoing everything. And while I was videoing, I was like, hey, I've got a camera. Let's just make a documentary. So I was like, how hard can it be, right? Well, so I started, ended up shooting a whole lot of footage and came across a ton of really good evidence. But there's a little bit more to making a documentary than you would actually think. It's actually extremely hard. And there's a reason why people go to acting school and, things to make themselves a little bit more presentable on camera. So I was looking at some of our earlier footage and I was like, good grief, this is some really good stuff. But, the camera presentation was just pure awful. Oh my God, it was terrible. But it took a little while to come across with some decent camera presentation skills. And so lo and behold, we came out with a documentary. It's called The Legend of the Downy Booger. And in doing so, we took a stance that we were just going to show what we were just going to show what we experienced. We weren't going to try to sway our audience one way or the other. We're just going to show what our evidence was. And there's a fine balance between entertainment and responsible documentary film. Right. So, you want to be responsible, but at the same time, you want to make things entertaining. So it took a long time to try and find that balance, but, luckily we did. and we came out with a very successful film. And we just got some good news from our distributor. We were selected to go into a DVD format. So not only are we going to be streaming on 9 or 10 different platforms, but we're also going to be in the big stores like Walmart and Best Buy and all these big stores with a hard copy DVD. So that was
That is freaking
news.
awesome, man!
Yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you. That was really good news for us. It told us that we're on the right track.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if anybody hadn't watched that yet, go watch it. It's an amazing
Definitely.
documentary. I mean, and I know Greg says all the time, "Oh, well, there's room for improvement," but it was really good, especially for your first one or your first one that you put out.
We appreciate it, and there's no worse critic than yourself on your own work.
Believe me, he gets on me all the time about my stuff. He's like, "Oh man, that looks good." I'm like, and he's like, "Stop." So I get it, Greg. I understand where you're coming from. Just
I'm the same way with my writing. I'm my own worst critic.
All three of us are the exact same way when it comes to our little niches. So we all just need to stop and take the compliments. Not that I'll take a compliment the next time, but I at least said it.
But when it comes to like the evidence that was in our film, honestly, we didn't put maybe half of what the really good evidence that we had documented. It was just because either camera presentation wasn't up to par, or we didn't do a good job documenting the evidence that we come across, and we just elected not to put it in the film because we look at ourselves and said, oh, we could have done this better, we could have done that better. But as I had shown Robbie some of the evidence that we had come across that was not in the film, and it's pretty compelling. It's like we were in this big field, and there were these bat houses at the end of the field, and they were on 4x4 posts, maybe 10 foot or so, and we came across these fingerprints that was on the 4x4. And the 4 fingerprints was on one side and the thumb was on the other. So whatever fingerprints those were, it had to have a big enough hand to go all the way around the 4x4. So it was things like that we just didn't put in the show. I guess we could have made room for it somewhere, but maybe in a future film we could put some of that stuff in there. But we had some really good stuff, though.
Yeah, and I've heard you tell the 4x4 thing, but you actually showed me the video, and I'm gonna tell you something, DA. Hearing about it, but then actually seeing the 4x4 post with that, it was just like, wow. Because I mean, it's clear as day. I mean, you just need to see it.
Yeah, you have to see it. Words does not do it justice. That's why when I speak, I carry a prop with me, a small 4x4, a piece of 4x4, and I was like, look, this is the type of post that this being had its hand all the way around. So there's nothing like tactile contact for an audience to better associate themselves with what you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. When you can relate to it, when you can get a firsthand look at just how big something is, it comes in a lot clearer than any amount of pictures you want to show, even if it's got something for scale in the picture. When you can physically feel the dimensions of something, it makes it a lot more real.
Right.
Yeah.
That's another reason why we carry the prints with us. We have a nice footprint and a nice handprint, and the handprint's just gargantuan.
Yeah, I got to marvel over that last night myself. And I've got big hands, DA, and putting my hand and Greg watched it. I was just like, holy, look at that. And it dwarfed my hand.
Yeah, and they were right next to each other. And coincidentally, Robbie was telling me about and I guess it was called a hunting blind. He referred to it as a hunting blind that was right next to a game trail. And that happened to us. I mean, exactly right where we found these big footprints and everything. I refer to it as a big giant bird's nest over on its side.
You talking about the ambush site that we were
Yes,
talking?
the ambush site. Yeah,
Bobby,
exactly.
how did that compare to the one we found in Joe Bald? Was it similar design?
Well, I didn't see. He didn't show me the picture of that. But as we were describing, as I was describing what we found in Joe Ball, Greg was like, "I saw the same thing." He said, "Did it look?" I said, "Yeah, it looked like a bird's nest turned up on its side." And he turned into a 6-year-old. That's exactly what it was. And we were both just in there. His wife was laughing at us, calling us 2-year-olds.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's phenomenal though when you hear somebody else independently talk about a very similar structure that you've seen yourself, and it looks odd. It
lends a lot of credence to what you found.
Right. So
especially when it's in a completely different part of the country.
Yeah. I mean, this was down in Lower Alabama. I mean, good grief. I mean, it was when we first found it. It was like, God, what is this? I was kind of joking at the time. I was like, man, I can get in here. I said, if I was Big Bird, I could lay some eggs in here. I was just kind of kidding at the time, but lo and behold, it turned out to really be an ambush site because we started looking around, and that's where we started seeing these tracks leading away from that ambush site. So maybe it's something more common than I first believed.
Well, when you've got a large predator, if it's going to create an ambush site, there's really got to be a certain similarity of the way they do things if they're going to obscure themselves from vision. And the one that Robbie and I and my son Noah found down at Joe Bald, until you were on top of it, you didn't realize what it was. It just looked like a bush. But when Robbie hunkered down and he said, "Boys, walk up the trail a little ways and let me know when you can't see me anymore." And I knew where he was and turned around after like 10 feet and couldn't find him.
Yeah, right. And this was built exactly the same way. From from the open end, you could see into it, but if you were coming at it from behind, there was no way you could have seen into this thing.
And it's like I was telling you, if Noah and I hadn't walked directly towards it and been down on the ground looking at what we were looking at, and Noah looked up and said, "Hey, look at that! Does that not look like where something could have been?" And I'm like,
and when I was on the trail, had I not known exactly where he was, I would have walked up on top of him before I even realized where it was at. Because I was specifically looking. I knew the spot. I knew the place. I knew what he was wearing. I was looking for Robbie, and I knew just where I had left him 10 seconds before. But if I had been coming from the other direction in that trail and not known there was something in there, I'd have been on top of it before I saw it.
It sounds like the design of these things were nearly identical.
And I told you this, Greg, and DA can vouch for this. I had plenty of room in there. There was room for something a lot bigger than me,
right,
to be hiding in there. I mean, something like twice my size or bigger could have easily hunkered down in there. And that, like we said last night, Greg, when I said, if the adaptive camouflage thing is a true thing, if something stands still and it disappears like we've seen on videos and things like that happen, that is a perfect ambush site because you're not going to see it until you're right on top of it.
Mrs. Moon wants to know what I'm wearing around my neck. That's my Celtic cross. Sorry.
And shout out to my little girl watching in the chat. She said I was ignoring her earlier. We were playing back and forth in chat. Hey, Taylor, love you.
But yeah, I was able to share with Robbie some, I think it's pretty exciting footage that I'm going to have in the upcoming film. We're about 50% done already with some of our investigative shooting. And we've got 2 more shoots coming up. No, 3 more shoots. One's going to be in Alabama and the rest will be out of state. And I'm so excited about it. And I'll share a little bit about some of our investigations when and coming up on the second film. I've got this camera. It's this camera here. It's Psionics Aurora. It's a full spectrum camera and can literally see in the dark. All it takes is a little bit of moonlight for it to have some really good camera footage. Well,
I'd say yours is probably far better quality than mine. And I just picked one up that's almost the same thing. It's just not a very expensive one.
Yeah, well, yeah, this one, the psionics, you don't have to. It will see into the infrared. So if you have an infrared light, that does make it like everything crystal clear. But you don't have to have an IR light. It literally will see with just moonlight. But anyway, we were in Georgia not too long ago, and I took my camera along with us, and we were kind of doing some experiments with some light sticks. And I took a light stick and I hung it way as high up as I could reach up in a tree, and just continued on down the trail, And we took another light stick and kind of threw out in front of us, and we just got settled down right there, And I took my camera, and I would just pan back and forth just random with it, And I wouldn't want to look through the eyepiece, because when you do, it ruins your night vision and you're not able to see. So it takes you 20-30 minutes to get that night vision back with your own eyes. So I've just learned to just pan just randomly. So I was going over some of that footage. But first, at first we thought it was just a dud night. We didn't think we had any kind of action at all. So we was coming back, but as we was coming back, my light stick was on the ground. And I was like, that's odd. And I'll pick it up and, put it in my pocket and throw it in the trash when I get back. And I didn't really think too much about it. I just thought maybe it just it fell. But as I was going over the footage, you can see, I pan over toward where the light stick was, and you can see the light stick in the footage. But standing right in front of the light stick was this figure, and you can see the silhouette of the shoulders and the head, and it's just standing there looking at us, and it has a clear view all the way to us, and it's just standing there looking at us. And I'm like, oh, that's weird. So I started moving with it a little bit, and you can kind of see the figure just kind of swaying back and forth some, and that kind of freaked me out. I was like, "Ooh, man, we were being watched and didn't even see or hear anything."
So, know that feeling.
Yeah.
Well, that night we were down in Joe Bald, we were catching eye shine from the area where that blind was, but we couldn't catch it. We knew it was down there, and as we started getting closer, of course, all three of us were all three of us had a pew pew in our hand. We'll put it that way. And and I was trying to film with one hand and keep myself covered with the other. But as we got closer, it just disappeared. And Robbie, I'm like, where'd it go? I think it's gone. Robbie's like, no, it's still out there. I can hear it. And the next morning, when we went back down there to try to cast those tracks, we got down there and we went to the area where the eye shine was, and it was actually a little dip down. So the spots where I was seeing the eye shine, it would have been standing in a depression. So it had to have been 7.5 feet tall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Speaking of that,
I
go
think
ahead.
it just worked its way into that little
I think it did
ambush
too. I think it
spot
went
we
into
found.
that blind and we lost it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when I said I could still hear it, I think that was it backing its way into that thing, just to see if we would go by it. So if we'd walked by it, we might have had some action that night.
Mm.
Good, bad, or indifferent, we'd have had.
There's
been
no
something
telling what
going
kind of
on.
action you could have had, right?
Yeah, maybe not the kind we wanted.
We would have seen if that 24-hour service was a full 24-hour service, or if it was just somebody sitting out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, speaking of eyeshine, I was able to show Robbie another clip that we're going to have in the second film. We're back in Bankhead, and we see these. At first, here, there's an object thrown at us, like a rock or something like that. Now, I don't know what it was. It was thrown at us, though. You could hear it land just a few feet away from us. And typically, when they do that, they're just trying to get your attention, But it was such a larger rock that it got my attention instead of a pebble or something. But I was a good little distance away from the edge of the woods. We're in a field, and I first turn over and look with my thermal, and you can see a dark object there in the thermal, which was dark hot. But it wasn't quite as dark as I would have expected it to be. And I take the thermal and I kind of look over at Brent for comparison. Brent's like, jet black, because black was hot. And I kind of looked back in there and it was more of a gray, and you can kind of see it move around a little bit in the woods. So I switch over from that thermal back to the psionics here. And then you could see the eyes. There's these eyes they're bright as can be, but you couldn't see them with your naked eye. But you could see them with the psionics. And at this time, there's this log that's got sort of laying. It's not laying on the ground, but it's parallel with the ground, about 3 foot up or so. Anyway, it's just over this little log peeking, at us, and it stays there for quite a while. And eventually, I got on camera where it kind of ducks down behind the log and it doesn't appear again. So that's an interesting clip that we've got.
You showed me that one last night, I think, too, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting clip.
So when is this next documentary scheduled to be completed and released?
We're going to complete principal filming in March, and we will have some pickup shots between March and May. And after the pickup shots, we'll begin full editing, and the editing process usually takes a few months. So we're probably looking at late fall for the next documentary. For the release.
Let's see, the question from Taylor says, sorry, this is off topic. Would you all want to do an episode on the ocean and everything that can be in it, considering we've only explored 5%? We have done stuff on water cryptids and specifically the megalodon, but it's a subject we're definitely going to be revisiting. Max Hawthorne, who's a famous cryptid writer, and we're going to try to get him back on the show as he's big into underwater cryptids. So I'm going to see if we can get Max back on the show and maybe do another deep water ocean bizarre creatures kind of story.
Yeah, the ocean scares me.
Okay, 3D, that's not funny.
Just get Robbie talking about sharks. He gets all excited.
Greg, speaking of that, Greg, I'll find it and show it to you. Remind me.
When I start getting I've swam in the ocean. I mean, we've gone to Myrtle Beach and stuff, but when I start getting water deeper in about the waist, and I start hearing "farewell and adieu, all you fair Spanish ladies," and I'm like, man, it's time to get back to shore.
It's the greatest movie of all time.
It is a great movie, but that scene always sticks with me.
Matter
You're
fact,
in the water. Are sharks in the water?
Matter of fact, that's what I was listening to on the way home from Greg's today. Was the book Jaws on Audible. Great book. Not as good as that, but still a good book.
Star Wars fan myself. I can't get into the sharks. Me and sharks don't get along.
Yeah, I'll pass.
Yeah, me and sharks don't get along. So I'm like, nope. Yeah, the water critters. They'll get you. Water critters, they just want to eat you. That's all they want to do. All they do is eat, swim, and reproduce. Eat, swim, reproduce.
Eat, swim, and make little babies.
That's right. That's all they do. And I don't want to be either one of those. I don't want to swim with them. I don't want to reproduce with them. And I don't want to be eaten by them. That's a nope.
That sounds like a big nope all the way around for me.
That's a big nope. Big nope, nope, nope. So I don't even carry water stuff with me at all. I don't buy it. I don't carry it. I'm not going to do it.
I'm not a diver. I used to snorkel when I was younger, but I'm not confident enough in my swimming ability to want to do any exploring with any kind of water cryptids unless I'm doing it from the shore.
Yeah, I don't even like plumbing
or a large boat.
I don't like water, so. Now I like to lay in a tub, but that's as close to the water as I want to get.
A hot tub.
Yeah, the hot tub, absolutely.
See, I'm just the opposite. One of my bucket list things is to go cage diving with great whites.
No, thank you.
That's a nope.
Now I'm not going to go out to the beach and go swim out. I'm not stupid. I want to do it as controlled as possible. I don't want to just I want to swim with sharks, so I'm just going to go out. Yeah, I want to do it as controlled as possible, but I want to do it.
I don't know. The back of my mind would be like thinking of exactly how much bite pressure those great whites have.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah, I don't know anything about the water.
See, Taylor, you got him talking about sharks.
Yeah, I don't know anything about water critters.
I didn't go off on a tangent. I just said I wanted to swim or do a cage dive with them.
I'll buy you a ticket for that one day, Robbie.
Good deal.
There's an area here in the Ozarks that I've only recently learned about that I want to get down to. At its widest point, it's about 12 miles wide and it's nearly 200 miles long. It traverses through part of the Ozark National Forest and the Mark Twain National Forest. It's an area called Crowley's Ridge. It was originally settled in the early 1800s by one of the first settlers, first white European settlers of the Missouri River Valley. It was granted to him after the War of 1812. And the area is famous for sightings. In fact, it was the area that was one of the first places the Arkansas wild man was ever spotted. It's rich with Bigfoot sightings even today. I'm shocked I'd never heard of this area, but I'm gonna start inquiring as it runs from the Boot Heel, Missouri, down through Arkansas, almost to Mississippi. It's 200. It's 200 miles long, a little over. But I'm going to start doing some research on that area to look and see what public areas of land I can get into. And barring that, I'll start looking for private areas of land I can get into if I can find the landowners. But I'm really excited about finding another place that's rich in sightings here in the Ozarks. And who knows, might be able to talk Greg into shooting a documentary just about Crowley's Ridge.
Hey, I'm up for shooting a documentary anywhere except the ocean. I'll go to Crowley's Ridge. I'll go to the LBL. I'll go to Skinwalker Ranch. I'll go anywhere to shoot because I don't know. I'm not afraid of any of the land critter stuff except for gators. Hate gators. They're amphibious though, so or
land and water.
They're reptilian, but they spend more time in water though. But anyway, Other
Crowley's
than
Ridge is infamous for the first night that Crowley and his family spent in their new cabin. The first night, a bear mauled his favorite horse to death.
a bear.
A bear. That's a big animal for a bear to maul to death. And generally,
It is.
Bears are pretty quick, but yeah, I don't know that it would catch a horse.
I think they could catch a horse, but at the same time, a horse is a big animal, and even though they could probably take down a horse, they risk injury, with a horse, because a horse is nothing to trifle with. You get kicked in the head with a horse, I mean, you're almost down for the count.
Yeah.
So
horse can put you down.
Yeah, quick life.
So then there's lots of folklore of wild men in that area from before European settlers were even in that area. That was an area that was pretty famous for the Quapaw, the Choctaw, even the Osage traversed that area pretty heavily. Lots of Native American lore along what they now call Crowley's Ridge, which is almost like a reverse of the LBL. LBL is a peninsula of land surrounded by water. This is a peninsula of land surrounded by valleys. It's a ridge line that just basically, even though it's it's quite a ways away from the Mississippi, it was actually part of the original floodplain for the Mississippi, because over the last 1,000 years or so, it's changed course a few times. But this was part of the original floodplain area of the Mississippi. And this little, and it's at its maximum elevation, it's about 200 feet above the area around it. But this whole ridge line is almost like a landlocked LBL, and so many stories coming off of this. It's going to be a really interesting place to get into.
I think it kind of would be an interesting place to go, because if like there's anything up on the peninsula, they're almost stuck there, just like the LBL. They're kind of stuck there, unless they want to fall down into a ravine or something. But it seems like interestingly enough, that's sort of what allegedly happened to the Downy Booger. They allegedly fell off a ravine or a cliff down to its demise, but who knows? But I think it'd be a very interesting place to go to.
Oh, to definitely.
Yeah, especially if it has some history there.
Yeah, the history dates back almost 200 years that I've been able to find thus far. But I'm going to do some more digging over the next few days to see what I can find.
Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting to go to. I mean, at least it sounds interesting. I love the name.
I think it'd be a lot of fun to go to.
Yeah.
And with it being 200 miles long and 12 miles wide, that's a lot of area to explore.
Absolutely. But I mean, it makes for a good documentary if you've got some good area and you have a good story to go along with it, and you can raise some awareness of some of the old stories and legends, and you don't let them die, because I mean that's every bit a part of history. Is what happened at the OK Corral, or whatever. These old stories are part of history, and that's what we tried to do with the Booger too, is just keep that story alive. And I'm very willing to do it one story at a time if I have to.
Yeah,
that's all you can do.
I think so the more we get into some of these backwoods areas, I think the more we're going to find that not only we're going to find that these creatures exist in more places than we believed previously. We're also going to start finding certain similarities of habitat that may allow us to predict where to find them.
I think you're absolutely right. When a lot of researchers start coming together and start comparing notes, even accidentally, like what happened with Robbie and I, it just dumbfounded me that he described exactly what I had been describing on several of the shows about this bird's nest over on its side, you know, in what I had surmised a while back that it was a hunting blind. You know, that to me is fascinating. So that tells me, I mean, these are hundreds of miles apart. You know, so what you know, I have a question about. Okay, how do they know to do this? Is this something that is taught down the line, or is it instinct?
I'm wondering how much of it is learned behavior, how much they're teaching to the next generation. But I've got a picture I want to share with you guys that I think you're going to find interesting. Miss Lene shared this in the group earlier, and I wanted to share this. When we start looking for these types of creatures, some of the things we have to look for is habitat. Is there enough supporting habitat for a creature like this to exist? And one of the things they would always need, is water. And I believe for a long time that they've used waterways as a highway system. And what people may not realize is just how interconnected the Mississippi River water system is. It is far reaching than anybody realizes. This picture I'm about to share is where all of the tributaries that eventually reach the Mississippi. You guys ready for this? It's kind of mind-blowing when you look at it.
Holy moly.
Those are rivers and streams that all eventually reach the Mississippi.
Wow.
See, a lot of that goes right through where, you know, the Downy Booger is.
Right.
Look, there's even part of that up here in my area.
Yep.
That little tip of South Carolina, that's where I live.
Yeah.
Wow.
The rivers and lakes and creeks that, you know, there's a massive network of rivers and creeks across this country. But what people fail to realize is just how many of them connect. And this is just such a great picture that emphasizes that. That's a vast area. And if they are using these waterways as highways, look at that. They could go anywhere in the Midwest.
Mm-hmm.
Well, think about that was one of the main things that they said over and over again in the Legend of Boggy Creek. He always followed the water.
Mm-hmm. Coincident that's a lot of where we did our investigations, is where there's bodies of water, you know, the creeks that leads to the rivers, you know, so on and so forth. There's always some good water around. And you know, I firmly believe that they would use the waterways as travelways. I also think that they could adapt and use the railways as travelways, and
I'm
power
hearing
lines
more stories of them using railways.
Mm-hmm. So I think they're quite smart. They're quite intelligent. So I think they're very adaptive.
Oh yeah.
You know? I think one of the things that kind of shocked me from the very beginning was just how intelligent that they really are. You know, they're not out building rockets, but at the same time, you know, I think they just have a different type of intelligence.
Well, I mean,
exactly. Look at chimps. Look how smart chimps are.
Yeah, and if they're utilizing something out there as any kind of tool, I mean that's on par with, you know, some of the more advanced stuff that we do. Just, you know, taking species for species. I mean, because that puts them leaps and bounds above any other animal out there. I mean, there's a lot of animals that use their environment, and I mean, it's using tools. I mean, think about the videos you've seen of orcas using water to wash a seal off of an ice floe. That's tool usage.
It is.
It's not picking up a stick and hitting something with it, but I mean that's using
water as a tool.
Yeah. So I mean, anything that can do that, that is a form of intelligence that's higher than most. Same thing with wolves using vocalization to coordinate an attack on a moose or an elk or something like that. I mean, that's a form and a higher level of intelligence, in my opinion. And I think these things are even higher than that.
Oh, absolutely. I think they have human level intelligence. It's just different. They just think differently than us. But I think they have human level intelligence. That's one of the reasons why they're so difficult to find.
Yeah. If you've got, just a great example is if you take two guys from similar backgrounds and send one to ranger school and one becomes a construction worker, and you put them both in the woods and tell them to get lost, you're going to find the construction worker, but you're not going to find that ranger.
Right.
And is that because the ranger is any smarter than the construction worker? Maybe
It's
not.
what he was taught.
Yeah. So, like I say, it's just they have a different knowledge and they have different needs. They just don't have a need to build a house or to cook their food, or maybe they do cook their food, or it's just they cook it different. I don't know, but I don't think they cook. I don't think they cook their food. So I don't think they have a need to build fire. I think they can withstand cold a whole lot more than we can.
I do too. Don Donaldson says, could they be learning to using hunting blinds from watching people using hunting blinds?
I think that hunting from an ambush spot is something way longer than they've been.
More primitive. It's more primal.
Exactly.
I think it's more primal.
I think
animals have been hunting.
If they're learning it from the previous generation of their own species.
Yeah,
that's what I think.
Cougars use ambush techniques all the time. I mean, they didn't learn it from us. They hunt from tigers, hunt from ambush. I mean, that's just a natural fact of the natural kingdom.
Yeah.
Glenn Dannison says, any evidence of them using fire?
I haven't seen any.
I personally have not. I've not talked to anybody that's witnessed, fire usage. But there are some old Native American stories that talk about them building fire and
I've heard
with the tribes.
So I've heard people say that they think
I won't say no.
They could, but I've never heard anybody say, "Yeah, I've found evidence of it." Because I mean,
yes,
I think they're intelligent enough too.
Yes, I won't say no. I just say I haven't observed it.
Yeah. Same. I've learned never to say never, but I've just haven't seen that.
And here's the thing: because we don't have the backing and the money like Les Stroud, and I use him because he's one of the few that I know that goes out and goes deep in the woods for weeks at a time. But what we're able to do, we're not going to be able to find anything like, unless we're just 1 in a million lucky. We're not where we're able to go with our limited equipment, money, time, whatever you want to call it, our limited resources. We're probably not going to find anything like that. But somebody like Les Stroud who goes, because you and I have talked about this several times, DA. I mean, you to really, really be able to get into finding one of these things and finding where it's at and all that. You would have to go and be able to just spend maybe even months finding the evidence, finding the tracks, tracking them, learning how they behave, just to maybe hopefully get a good glimpse of one to find some of this kind of stuff. So in my personal opinion, which is all this is you would have to be somebody that was just out there constantly before you could find something like that. I don't think any one of us that are hobbyists at this like we are right now is going to just stumble up on something like that because that's something that's going to be way deeper than any of us are able to go at this particular point.
Yeah.
In my opinion, one of the best researchers in this field is Kunbo Baker. Love him or hate him. Some people like the guy. Some people can't stand the guy. I have a great deal of respect for him. But I listened to him give a talk one time, and he said something that made absolutely perfect sense to me. And it kind of throws shade in the face of all of these shows out there that, where, the 1,000,001 shows that are on Animal Planet where they go out and they spend an evening beating on trees and hollering and claiming they found evidence. And they always seem to find something. Kumbo said in any expedition he's ever done, he really hasn't gotten anything worth even noting in less than 3 days. He said it generally takes a couple of days of you just not making a lot of noise for the woods to settle down around you and things to really start going back to the way they are. And that's, to me, that's one of the things that I've always tried to embrace. I haven't always been able to spend 3 or 4 days out in the woods, but anytime I go into an area, one of the first things I do is just sit down and be quiet for a while. Just kind of let things settle down and go back to normal, because the more you're traipsing around making noise, the more you're chasing things away.
Mm-hmm. Well, too, if they're in the area and they want to be around you, they're going to come to you. I promise you, they're going to know you're there way before you're going to know anything about them. And if they don't want to be seen, I mean, as soon as you get into the area, they're going to go, and you're not even going to know they exist. So you're not going to sneak up on one. You're not going to just. I think it would be extremely rare to have a chance encounter with one, unless it wanted, to be, unless it was curious about you. I can't fathom somebody sneaking up on a Sasquatch.
Right.
I just can't fathom that. So what we normally do is just go out and find a good spot and kind of settle down and let them come to us. That's what we normally do.
Something else Kumbo talked about. He talked about using what do they call it? It's a type of horn, an Israeli horn.
The kudu, that's what Andy been.
Yeah, the kudu horn. But there's another name for it. I cannot off the top of my head think of it. But I got one. Got my hands on one.
Shofar, Jericho shofar.
Shofar, yeah. I got my hands on a shofar. I don't know how to play it, but I would definitely love to see what happens if I do.
That's remember the books I told you about when we were talking about the other show we're going to do from the other place. That horn is mentioned very heavily in that book too, just like you mentioned it in Nightmare Hunters.
Yeah, I couldn't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but I got my hands on one. And again, I don't know how to play the thing, but I would be very interested to find out what happens when we try it. But I'm not an idiot, so I'm not going to go unarmed.
Yeah, I'm not a musician at all, so sometimes we will go out and we play music, and I'll take like Indian drumming music, and we'll play it, and we actually have really good results with the drummings. Some drummings more than others, but we have good results with drummings. And it's not all time Bigfoot related. I would say sometimes it's just weird stuff that happens.
Like what?
Like the orbs that'll happen, and every once in a while you get these disembodied voices. It's just weird stuff,
Disembodied voices, like, can you actually make out the words, or is it just
sometimes you can? Yes, absolutely. Janice, the lady that's in our group, on multiple occasions, she's heard in my voice, but I was nowhere around, say, "Hey, Janice," in my voice. Another instance, a guy named Paul Holsey was on expedition, and we played music a lot around on this expedition, and he heard, "Hey, Paul." Again, it was in my voice. And I didn't quite understand what the fascination was with my voice, but both of those instances, I was nowhere near around, and there were multiple witnesses of these disembodied voices. And I've got a disembodied voice that's going to be coming up in our other film. Now, this one's more of a shriek, but all other people and voices are accounted for. That's there. You can actually either see or hear them talking, and you hear this other shriek come through, and it catches all of us. I mean, we all hear it. So yeah, there's sometimes it's words that you can distinctly hear, and sometimes it's just a mumbling, indistinct chattering.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just the drumming brings up weird things sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes it brings up some weird stuff.
Might have to try that. That sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah. Go
Hey,
on.
man, I'm all for trying new things because you never know what's going to work, and sometimes doing the same old thing over and over again will net you nothing, and you've got to try different things once in a while, just to keep your game fresh and keep them guessing. And what's the old expression? If it's stupid but it works, it ain't stupid.
There you go. We had a hilarious event happen one time. We were playing these, different songs. It was just songs, and it was Paul Halsey who was had the music playing, and then he played this song. I forgot what it was, but it was horrible. And this big stick just came flinging through the woods, landed right between his legs. It's like, stop it.
Turn that crap off.
Turn that off.
Some of us are trying to sleep around here.
I mean, if it wasn't so funny, it would almost been scary. Because
Kungo Baker was talking about playing, I think it was Leonard Skinner, and got rocks thrown at him.
Yeah, so they like some music better than others. I promise you that. I forgot who that was, but what song it was. But my gosh, it got an instant result, absolutely instant result. And to this day, Paul carries that stick with him.
Good reminder.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've had all kinds of interesting things happen to us when playing music. The orbs probably being the more fantastic, visually.
Miss Naomi pointed out it was Led Zeppelin, not Leonard Skinner. I knew again with an L. I couldn't remember, but apparently Bigfoot does not like Led Zeppelin, and you know what? I don't blame him. Not a Led Zeppelin fan either.
There's a few good Zeppelin songs, but yeah.
For the most part, I just think they're overrated.
I'm less shocked about them throwing rocks at Led Zeppelin than I was when you said it was Leonard Skinner, because I was like, what self-respecting Sasquatch would not like Leonard Skinner? I mean, my gosh.
Yeah.
Who doesn't like Simple Man?
Exactly.
Or Sweet Home Alabama.
Freebird.
Good point.
I mean,
yeah. That's going to be our theme song.
Miss Naomi says, I once had things thrown at me while I was singing, but it was in a karaoke bar, not in the woods.
I don't even try, so at least you try.
Nobody wants to hear me sing, not even me.
Me either. So I wouldn't call what I do singing.
I'm a tone-deaf hillbilly, can't carry tune in a bucket.
Would it be classified as caterwauling, Greg?
I don't know how you would describe it, a shrieking or caterwauling, or I don't know what you would call it.
Cow stuck in a gopher hole?
Yeah. I don't know. It's just, it's not anything that anybody would want to pay to hear. I guarantee you.
I'm like DA. I can't carry a tune in a bucket either, so.
Yeah, that's why I carry radio. Sometimes I can't even find a good channel to listen to, so I can't even work that.
That's why you take an MP3 player. That way you can just pick the song you want.
I envision Bigfoot.
Although,
Peyton Parrish
if you're gonna play MP3s of sounds, I don't recommend Dying Rabbit and LBL at 2:00 in the morning when you're by yourself. I just don't recommend it.
Well,
not my brightest move ever.
Yeah, I don't recommend being by yourself anywhere at any time in the woods because anything can happen to you. That's, hint number one: never be by yourself. If you are by yourself, you need to be able to protect yourself.
I've spent so
So,
many years working patrol where I was used to being by myself to, go explore stuff. And the only time I ever called for somebody else is if I found something. You didn't just
Yeah.
get the heebie-jeebies and call for backup. You had to have a legitimate reason to call for an additional officer. So
mhm,
I've still got that mindset. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go freaking check it out. If I run into something, then I'll yell for help.
mhm. One thing I think I've learned over all this is, this whole time I was thinking, Sasquatch would just be crashing through the woods and you would hear it walking up. Every time that we've actually caught footage of something, we didn't hear a thing.
Well,
We didn't hear it, didn't see it.
it's funny you should talk about how quiet thing can move. Have you ever gone to like a wilderness retreat or uh, like I don't know what they call them. They used to call it hillbilly days outside of where I grew up, but they call them these frontier excursions or Wild West days where they have all these reenactors. Um, I used to go to one every year when it was just outside of Lebanon, out by Bennett Springs, Missouri, and they would have. And I competed a few times in the black powder rifle, but they would have guys that would be out there in full period gear. Right down to they killed the deer or the elk that they used to make the leather that they used to craft the boots, that kind of thing. And I've gone deer hunting and turkey hunting with some of those guys, and you would be amazed. I mean, amazed at the difference in the noise level that a regular boot versus a moccasin boot makes in the woods. The moccasin boot is so much quieter, and it's almost like you're barefoot.
Really.
Yeah, moccasins are 50 times quieter than a regular like boots like we would wear or buy at a store.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, interesting you say that. One of the guys that we had in our first film, he was, he would talk to us about some Sasquatch experiences that he had, and he was actually a real life trapper. I mean, that's what he did for a living. And he said he was having a very difficult time, hadn't had any traps within. He said it was a couple of weeks, and that's a long time without any pay.
Yeah.
So he said it was one cold night, and he was sleeping up on a rock, and he heard something walking up through the woods, and right next to him, heard this big flop, and he said he was so scared he wouldn't turn around or anything, and then whatever it was walked away. But when the sun finally came up and he had enough nerve to turn around, it was a deer that something dropped, killed and dropped off for him. So
Did he say how it was killed?
His neck was broken.
Well, that's not something typical deer hunters do.
No, no.
That takes a tremendous amount of strength to break a deer's neck.
Yeah. Oh, extremely. He said it was turned around. His head was turned around. It was turned around backward, facing, the opposite way. So that's, we didn't put that story in the film. That was kind of a personal story he had told us, and we didn't really know how to relay that without it being grotesque.
Mm-hmm.
And it took him a while to tell the story. We didn't film it anyway. So he didn't really want it filmed, but he didn't mind us sharing it. But, interestingly enough, I'm wondering what kind of connection that, the old Indians did have with some of the Sasquatch. I know there's plenty of stories about them trading with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also stories about them invading each other's territory and them going to war or nearly going to war. So
right. Or, lots of stories of Native Americans being abducted as well. Rhonda Montpettit says, my family did those reenactments. Mike's, I think she meant moccasins. Mocks are nearly silent. My family calls me the ghost. We'd be stunned how quietly somebody in a good pair of moccasins can walk. Yeah,
Yep.
Mrs. Moon, Rendezvous, yeah. But they called it Hillbilly Days here in Missouri, and it was a week-long event. It happened every year right around the 4th of July outside of Lebanon. They haven't done it in probably 25 years. I really wish they would go back to doing it because it was a fun event. And I got to
Mhm.
meet a lot of really cool people. It's where I learned to throw hatchets, uh, where I learned to shoot a black powder rifle. But you would meet some of those guys that would just travel to these events all over the country. And some of those guys were just scary good with black powder rifles and making their own moccasins. In fact, somewhere in my notes and books and crap on my shelf, I've got a pattern for I believe it was Salish, a Salish tribe design for moccasins that a guy gave me at one of those powwows, which was really neat. Yeah, moccasins are, there's no comparison comparing moccasins to boots when they're in the woods. Just and a Bigfoot foot to me has got to be very much like a moccasin because the bottoms of their feet are going to be calloused from never wearing shoes. They're
Mhm.
probably that thick layer, and it's going to be
Mhm.
very similar to the leather that is treated on the bottom of a pair of moccasins. So I mean, when your foot is hitting the ground and spreading out, it's a whole lot different than when a rigid rubber or even plastic type material from a boot print hits the ground because it's going to hit stuff and break it and force it to conform to it, but your foot is going to conform to what it lands on. So I think that lends a big amount to why they're so quiet.
Hmm. Absolutely. I'll go as far as to say that I've not had, we haven't filmed anything that we've actually heard or seen.
Mhm.
Everything that we've got on film has been quite by accident. Um, so, that's another thing that you really, if anybody's going to go out and do some cowboy investigations and to experience some of this stuff on their own, if you really want to do that, you need to have a camera with you. And at just when I go out, I just kind of pan at random. Sometimes it's behind me, sometimes off to the side, whatever, try to catch something off guard. And I don't project any beams. Uh, that means IR. I do not go out with IR. I firmly think that they can see into the IR range.
Mhm.
So I think you're just scaring them away with, you're just like shining a big old giant flashlight out in the woods if you've got IR. So that's why I like thermal uh, or this little psionics right here that you don't have to have IR with it to be able to see. Just a sliver of moonlight's all you need.
I agree with you. I think that they can see into the IR spectrum. There's been so many accounts of people that live out in the country that have found sticks shoved in the ground right at the edge of where the motion sensor kicks in on their lights. They've also,
Mm.
described having coming home and found that their IR light has been pushed up, um,
Mm.
avoiding, and not only that, avoiding trail cameras. I think it's very likely they see into the IR spectrum.
Well, you stayed in the cabin in Gatlinburg where that very thing
Yeah,
happened.
yeah, pushed up one of the IR motion sensor cameras, not cameras, motion sensor lights.
Really?
Yeah, I've got
So,
pictures of it.
that kind of lends credence to a hypothesis I had about that. I just, at first, we used a lot of IR and we weren't getting anything. We weren't getting anywhere with IR. So I was like, hey, look, I mean, there's no sense in, uh, repeating the same thing over and over and getting the same results. We've got to try something different. So that's why we moved away from, projection of any kind of lights, unless it's to film us.
Right.
And that's something we've talked about for I can't remember how long we've talked about that IR thing, that we just felt like that was something that they could see in because of things like you talk about the sticks being shoved into the ground right at that edge of that border where it cuts on. look for answers that are right there in front of you. Why would you have something like that? Well, probably because they can see in that spectrum.
Yeah,
Like Greg said, it's like, I mean, if you look and you watch videos where somebody is behind a group of Navy SEALs that are training and they're shooting infrared, what do you always see when they show the nighttime videos? If the video is being shot in infrared and they've got their lasers on their guns, you see them green lasers going everywhere. Now you can't see that with your eyes, but if you look at infrared, you see those things going all over the place. I think it's the same thing. I think they see those lights shining all over. Deer can see that.
Exactly. Yes, they absolutely can.
Greg Robert D had a question for you. He says, have you seen a Dogman, and what are your ideas on them?
I have not seen a confirmed Dogman. However, when I was a kid, I came across some footprints in a fresh snow, and those footprints had like they weren't gigantic, but I'd say they were 14 inches, something like that. But they weren't gigantic, but they only had 3 toes. And at the time, I'd never even heard of Dogman. I mean, I was a kid, and Dogman, it looked more like a wolf sort of footprints. Looking back on it, so I've had enough reports come in to say that there probably is a Dogman, or what we would call a Dogman, a snouted Bigfoot, So I think, there probably is something out there that is Dogman. I think that rabbit hole just gets really, really deep when you go into these cryptids. I mean, when I first started, I thought that Bigfoot was like in just a little box. I could put it in a box and it was just an ape, and we'd be able to find it. And especially from the amount of evidence that we got at the very beginning, I really thought that we would solve this in just no time, because we came across tracks, handprints, vocalizations, chattering, trees being snapped and being pushed over. And they were all around us, whistles. I mean, everything that you can imagine. We were just not getting them on film, but we were just thought, hey, it's just a matter of time. But as we started to investigate more, all these other things started happening. Like at first I thought I saw car tail lights out in the woods. I'm like, what is a car doing out here? I mean, we're in the middle of the national forest. There's no roads here. And I think that was my first glimpse at orbs or glowing eyes or whatever. I still don't know what that was, but they were red. I left a recorder out on a parabolic mic, and I was able to pick up like old Indian chants with the drumming along with it. We've had disembodied voices. You've had just this chatter that is some sort of language that you can't explain. We've had missing time and just all sorts of just weird stuff. So why would I say that there's no Dogman? Or, people are seeing something. There's a lot of reports of them. Yeah, there's a lot of reports. People are seeing something. So, well, I think the likelihood could be, yeah, absolutely.
I showed him the picture of our track last night, DA.
Mm-hmm.
That is a good sized canine.
It's a big track. Very, very much reminds me of what I saw when I was a kid.
Greg, just so you can see, remember how big I told you that knife was? Yes. That's the knife. And you see how far apart my fingers are spread, and you saw that track was
Mhm.
a little bit bigger than that knife.
Mhm.
It's
I
a
mean,
good sized track.
Bigger than his knife.
That's
Karen Ellsworth wants to know if you'll elaborate on the missing time.
The missing time. Okay. I will say this from my perspective, there was no missing time. Okay. But this is the event that happened. Janice and I, when we would go out and investigate, we would normally leave camp in pairs, at minimum pairs, sometimes all of us, but at minimum pairs. And we would stay out 45 minutes to an hour and then come back. That was our routine. So one time Janice and I went out and we started looking at, we saw this big purplish ball of light. It was purplish. It was big. These other little tiny balls of light were settling in around it and just kind of moving all around. It was fascinating. So we stayed there and watched it for a while, and eventually it dissipated. And we're like, well, I guess all the action's gone. And we thought we were there maybe an hour. And when we come back, Brent and her son was like, where have y'all been? And we're like, what are you talking about? Just down the thing. And we were there for a few minutes. They're like, no, you've been gone like 5 hours. And we're like, no way. From my perspective, we were there 45 minutes to an hour. And from Janice's as well. But they said that we were just out of fire light, just out of the range of the fire, talking. They heard us talking back and forth. And we were nowhere near camp. We were, a mile or so away from camp, or half a mile away from camp. And we were nowhere near there. But yet they heard us talking, and they thought they heard us talking for like 5 hours, And I thought they were crazy until a few minutes later, the sun started coming up. So I was like, yeah, we were gone a long time. But from my perspective, we were not gone at all, if that makes any kind of sense. So somehow, somewhere, we stayed gone for a long time, and we were looking at what we thought, for lack of another term, I don't know what it was we saw. I want to call it a portal. I'm not saying that's what it is. I'm just saying it was a big giant ball of purplish looking light with these little blue lights coming in and out of it. And eventually it dissipated. So, I was mesmerized by it. So was it possible that we stood there and just talked for 5 hours? I guess that's possible, but I'm not a giant talker. So I see another question from Robert D. Yeah. My ideas on the UFO thing. Well, there's people that believe things. And there's people that know things. I'm one of those people that knows UFOs they exist. I know they do. I've seen them. I've had a very close encounter with one, particularly when I was a kid. And this is actually runs into another instance of missing time. I was a kid, and I had my two older brothers with me and 2 older cousins, and we were on a road. We were traveling down to my grandmother's, and this big giant light shined down on us. I mean, and when I say light, it was so bright, and it felt like you could feel the light. Felt like it had an energy to it, and you couldn't see beyond the end of the ring of the light. And I remember being terrified at that point. And then my next memory is being on my grandmother's porch, which is a covered porch. And I'm thinking, how is the light shining through the porch? And then the light lifted, not cut off, it lifted up and went. And I was too scared to go out and look at the craft, but my older brother did. He looked at it and he said it was a gargantuan triangle. Um, he said it was, probably 300 yards across and probably twice treetop high, and had just a little bit of movement and then was gone. So I thought for years and years that I was just too little to be able to remember how I got from the middle of the road over to my grandmother's, which was about 150 yards away. You would think I would remember that trip, being terrified, or I thought I would remember that trip. Now, but I thought maybe I was just too young. But recently, I mean, it was just this past year. All of us were together at one of my aunt's funerals. And I asked my cousins and my brothers about, like, hey, do you remember, this event that happened? And we all would remember it. And we were sitting there talking about it. And I said, do you remember how we got from the middle of the road to our grandmother's porch? And every one of us has the exact same memory gap. All of us do. None of us remember how we got from the middle of the road to my grandmother's porch. So that is an instance of missing time that I absolutely have. And it's one of those things where I don't go hunting for aliens because you might find them. So I know they exist. I'm one of these people. I know it just like this cup. I know this cup exists. I know aliens exist. I know UFOs exist. So that's my take on it.
I think that's a good take.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same with, like you said about Dogman earlier. You can't say I believe in Bigfoot, but I don't believe in Dogman, and I don't believe in this. And if you're open to the possibility that this thing could exist, then you've got to have an open enough mind to say what else can exist. And I think that's where a lot of when adults have that oh shit moment, for lack of a better term, when they see one of these things for the first time, one or two things happen. They either become like we are and just want to know more, or it completely shuts them down. And if they're open-minded like we are, and then they can't truly say, oh, I believe in this, but I don't believe in that. I had this discussion with some people that, at another department I worked at, and they're like, they used to laugh at me for believing in Bigfoot, yet in the same breath they talk about believing aliens existed and things like that. And I'm like, stop, wait a minute. You can sit there and say that you believe ghosts and aliens exist, but you're making fun of me because I think Bigfoot exists. How can you reason that out?
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that I really hope my film, or I hope would be an impact of my film, is to challenge people's skepticism. Because I challenged my own skepticism going through it. And I would hope that we could push the envelope and at least get people to discussing the matters, kind of like what we're doing here. But, if other people see it and like, well, if you can bring the topic more open into the open, for discussion, I think we can broaden our horizons just a little bit, and open our minds to our true existence, and the existence of other things around us, like other dimensions and aliens and everything else that could possibly exist.
3D Havoc says, what kind of gear do you carry into the field and why?
What kind of a gear? That question depends on what my objective is when I go out into the field. If I'm going to go out and film an episode, I carry a bunch of camera gear with me. I carry some lighting stuff. It gets very labor intensive if I'm going out to film, and a lot of that gear, it's lights, it's audio gear, it's camera gear, and a lot of that is to make sure that the video and audio quality is on par with what somebody would want to watch. You don't want to watch a grainy video, so you have to have enough lighting and a good enough camera that produces a good picture. And there's nothing worse than bad audio. And audio was our kryptonite in the very beginning. We've got some tricks in us now to where that's not going to be a problem anymore. But if I'm going out just to investigate on my own, I carry a small camera and I carry an audio recorder. Now, I do have body cameras, these little law enforcement body cameras. I do carry these with me, and I'll put on my chest. And I carry these with me whether I'm investigating on that we've gotten. So one thing you want to remember is that you're not going to see everything when you're out in the woods. You're going to see very little when you're out in the woods. You're going to catch more with a camera, and you always, always, always need audio. And you need an independent audio source, because this is what's going to happen when you're out in the woods. You're going to have electronic failure in either your audio or your video. You can expect that to happen multiple times, particularly when you get around a situation where you're about to have an encounter. I would say at least half the times we've had encounters, we've had audio video problems. For one various thing or another. But you do want audio. I would take an audio recorder, strap it to your arm or something like that. Wear clothing that does not make a lot of noise when you you don't want to wear parachute pants out, for example. You don't want, you don't want that. The same with your jackets and things like that. So I wear like a canvas jacket that doesn't make a lot of noise, and so and it's not necessarily for the other animal. That's for your audio and your video mics, so that it's more clear as to what's going on. Like I say, the body cams. These body cams right here are ultra cheap. They're very cheap. Go out and buy you one. It doesn't take a very expensive camera either, and when you're out in the camera, just pan, randomly, particularly at unexpected times. So that's what I carry depends on my objective. If I'm filming, I carry a whole lot of heavy duty camera gear, lighting gear, and audio gear. If I'm going out for fun, or if it's at night, I go pretty much what I call lightweight. So small cameras, audio recorders.
Greedy Havoc says, tricks, any chance we can hear some of those?
Tricks. Okay. One is to find an area where there's been some reports. If you go to where there's a history of sightings. It doesn't have to be the exact same spot because, you know, these things travel around. You want to find where there's water. That's one. There's got to be water around. And it really does need to be some running water. Lakes are, you know, they're, if it's a big enough lake, but just a small standing pond, yeah, they do visit those. We've had incidences where we found footprints going around small standing ponds, but those tend to, I think they visit those more for all the frogs and fish that are in them, you know, to eat. I don't know if they necessarily drink that type of water, but an area where there's been reports and there is water. Persistence is another one. Make sure you persist on going back to some of these same places, particularly if you've found any tracks. Another, you might want to look up into the trees, particularly when you're near coming down a hill. If you're going downhill, you always want to look about 7 feet up, because what we have noticed, they have a tendency to grab a hold of a tree to steady themselves, and some of that bark is going to be missing from around some of the trees about 7 foot up. Okay. That's another thing to look for. Another thing to look for is when if you find a stick structure, and some of the structure is not native to the immediate area. I mean, what I mean by native to the immediate area is that it's not possible for it to have fallen into its place where the structure is. If it obviously had to be moved in, that's another thing that you want to look for. So that's going to differentiate between natural fall and structures. Another one would be the weaving of materials. If you find a structure, we found lots of that. You know, naturally, I can't see where vines weave themselves together. Maybe it's possible. I don't know, but I don't think so. You know, but one of the biggest tricks you want to do, just go out and do it yourself, and you will eventually get experience. That's one of the big things, experience. Just get out and do it.
Miss Naoma had a question for you. She says, have you seen something in the camera later that turned your blood cold? Something super close, something that doesn't fit any of the narratives?
Oh, absolutely. It's in our first film. If you haven't seen the Downy Booger, I'd encourage you to go back and look at that. We were filming an orb, and we rented a real high-end camera, and the reason why we did that is I wanted to film an orb because we were not getting anything on night vision. So we we go to this place where we see these orbs, and we have a lot of luck filming this orb. I mean, we were filming this thing all night. And when we go back to in edit, in post, we find this thing crawling between us and this orb. And it's probably 30, 40 feet away from us. And this thing is huge. It's gigantic. The camera tries to focus on it, and it just eventually gives up, and it finally focuses on the orb. But it's almost like the whatever's crawling in between us and that orb has an oh shit moment. It's like, oh crap, I'm on camera, you know, and it like crawls over here and crawls over there and finally crawls off screen. Janice mentioned that she did see something running down the trail that was tall and dark. At the time I was like, I didn't hear nothing, I didn't see anything. But yeah, that was a situation where I didn't see it. Nobody saw it. Nobody heard it, while it was crawling. Another situation is a time we were at the same place, and I catch something on this camera right here. It's going to be in film number 2. So I didn't see it while we were there, but it was standing there looking at us. So the short answer is yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why I say, if they want you, they'll get you if they want you.
Yep.
Very much so.
Yeah, because if that was the case, there's several times that I'd have been God already.
With the situations you guys have been in, I bet you've been watched from one end to the other. Do you guys normally carry cameras around with you that you're filming with you all the time?
Not constantly, but we do try to film a lot.
I would encourage you to film all the time. I think you would be surprised at how much your eyes miss.
I'm sure she feels the same way, but I wish Jessica and I had cameras like you got right there with us that night in Georgia. Because I feel like they were really, really close to us that night. Y'all have heard that story. Jessica and I have talked about it on her show. We've talked about it on this show. How quickly I'm talking, this was like being at a 150 decibel concert. I mean, these crickets were going nuts. And then I cannot stress how fast it went from so loud that she and I were having to almost yell standing 2 feet away from each other to just dead silence. And it was like, and it was just like, it was like getting hit in the face with a sledgehammer, how profound, how sudden that was. But that goes back to what we're talking about them sneaking up on you and how quiet they were, because we never heard anything. It was just a feeling, and I could just sense that there was something over her shoulder about maybe 15, 20 feet away. And while I'm thinking that way, she's looking over my shoulder, and she's like, because I said, I think something's in the woods right behind you. She said, I think something's in the woods behind you. And then we felt like there was something down, like we were being triangulated. And it was just, I wish we'd have had one of those cameras like you had at that point, because that would have been some amazing footage.
Yeah. I found that whenever we've had encounters, particularly early on, there's always been more than one. Always been more than one. So I rarely think that they travel alone.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, and people have asked me and Jessica about it, we weren't out there investigating. She was just showing me places that she investigates. We were just out enjoying we weren't out there to try to prove or disprove anything. We were just out there. But looking back on it, I wish for my personal, satisfaction, I wish we'd have had something like that at the time. But we weren't out there to try to prove or disprove Bigfoot. At that
That's what I mean. Anytime you're out doing something like that, I found it handy to always be carrying something.
And that, in all fairness, that was really when I really first started really getting into it. I mean, it's always interested me, but I hadn't really started going like headlong into it, and I didn't have a whole lot. I had the weapons, just didn't have any of the other stuff. So, yeah, it is what it is.
I'll say this about that place that you were at. It's the first time that I've ever seen a shadow person. Before then, you couldn't have convinced me that shadow people existed, because hadn't experienced it until I saw one, and it challenges your worldview. Anyway, but the first time I saw a shadow person, I was kind of flabbergasted a little bit. But then, as I was doing an Estes method, my buddy saw one, Brent saw one, and it freaked. You remember, Robbie, you talked about, what happens when you see something that it's not supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
The
well,
conversation we were having last night.
yeah, Brent still has not come to terms with that. So
Yeah,
it's
and
yeah,
it's like I said, you're gonna have one or two reactions, and his mind is probably still debating on what his reaction is going to be.
mm-hmm. Yeah. He refuses to go back there because of that. I
Well,
mean,
and DA talks about that too. He talks about people who are lifelong hunters that finally have that, and they're like, "I'm done."
Yep.
mm-hmm.
I can't imagine anything scaring me out of the woods to say that I'm never going to hunt again. That's just me. But I've never had an encounter like that. Now, had I had an encounter like Fred has had, if my first encounter had been like that, then I may never have went in the woods again. Luckily, my encounter was not any kind of terrible or horrible thing. It was just a curiosity thing. But
Mm-hmm.
had I, especially at the age I was, had something like the story Fred tells us, which I'm like, I'm glad that was not my encounter. And hats off to Fred for going even remotely close to where he won't go right back to it, but he still goes closer than I would have expected him to go. As hats off to him for that, because have you ever heard him tell his story, Greg?
I have not. No.
Woo!
It's pretty terrifying. It's very intense.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And no matter how many times I've heard him tell it and watched him tell it, it's still, you can physically see it affect him. You can hear his dogs start moving around and whining around him because they can sense that it's starting to get to him.
Mm-hmm. And that's when I talked to Brent about it, he wouldn't talk to me about it for quite a while. So apparently whatever he saw kind of really shook him, I haven't seen that footage myself to see if it's on camera, and I doubt he has. He said he didn't see it on the camera, but he could see it with his eyes. Our eyes are better than cameras. So I don't know. Maybe it's there on camera and you can see it, but I haven't seen that footage and I don't remember a whole lot from it myself. But I do know that it was an encounter that I don't think he wants to repeat.
Some people, that's the reaction they get.
Yeah.
Even if it's just they saw cryptid.
Mm-hmm.
They want to go back to have their head buried in the sand like an ostrich and don't want to acknowledge that exists. They don't want to see it again. They want nothing more to do with it. And I've talked to a lot of lifelong deer hunters that were done. Like, nope, not going back out there. I don't want to run the risk of seeing that thing again. I'm done. But then you get the other end of the spectrum. You get idiots like me and Robbie that it just becomes almost an obsession.
It does with me too. I mean, I guess you can lump me in with you two idiots.
Well, you're in good company, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. That's what one of the things I wanted to I hope my film did was just like push the envelope on that. Hey, other things exist. Not everything that you see is a demon. Do demons exist? I'm sure they do. However, I don't think everything's a demon. Not there might be shadow people out there that's just like me and you, except they're just curious.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I'm willing to explore some. I'm not going to be afraid of something I don't understand.
Well, like you said, there has to be balance in everything. There's good, there's bad. If there's
Mhm.
dark, there's light. If
Right.
there's day, there's night. There's a balance to everything. So, and I've said this before. If you listen to some people's recounts of what happened to them, it's like, oh, it was so peaceful. I saw the thing. We looked at, and my first encounter. I mean, it wasn't peaceful to me because I was scared to death because I was a kid. And what I saw was a big monster, even though I knew it was. But the creature itself had intended to do no harm. Because if DA asked me that the very first time we ever talked on the show, he said, "Do you think that there was any intent for it to harm you?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Why not?" I said, "Because there was a little screen door about that thick was between us. If it wanted to come get me, I wouldn't be sitting here telling this story right now."
Mm-hmm.
I
But
think in a
then
lot of cases, especially when people have close encounters, had it meant to be violent, it would have been. But
Yeah.
then there are
Mhm.
other cases where the encounter is violent, and those are the ones that really worry me. Because even if, say, 1% of encounters with a cryptid are violent, then you have to be prepared for 100% of them to
Mhm.
be violent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
that's the point I was getting to. I mean, because think about all the interactions humans have with chimpanzees, all the people that have, chimpanzees as pets. They don't all end up violent. But then
Right.
you got the ones where the guy got his face ripped off by a chimpanzee.
Mm-hmm.
That's freaking terrifying.
They've
It
killed
is.
people.
Yeah. I mean, they could literally rip your arms off and beat you to death with them. Not that you'd be or alive long after they rip your arms off, but they're going to beat you to the rest of the death with them. But the point is, everybody that's ever owned a chimp has not had that happen. But it has happened because chimps have
Mhm.
personalities, just like people have personalities, just like dogs have personalities. Point
Mhm.
is, it has to be that balance. There has to be, if there's this, there has to be this over here to balance it out. If not, things
Absolutely.
are, so far out of
Absolutely.
whack.
And as a filmmaker, I think I would be, I think it would be irresponsible for me to say that uh, these things are all just, fuzzy, cuddly little teddy bears, and they never ever mean you any harm. Even though I've not had any violent encounters, does not necessarily mean that all of them are fuzzy little teddy bears. I think that they have the potential, just because of their size and the sheer strength, to do enormous harm to us humans. So, like you said, there's got to be some balance in there. You need to be aware, and that's one of the other goals that I hope my film brings out is awareness. Hey, be aware, because I was extremely skeptical when I started, but no, there's something out there. There definitely is things out there, and you just need to be aware, prepared for yourself.
Yeah.
I agree.
Uh, you know, it's like if somebody wants to own an exotic cat, you can't just go out and buy one of those.
Right.
There are licenses and there are things that have to be done.
You have
Things
to
have to
do it
be
legally.
inspected. But why is that? Because there is a danger that you may get eaten. That's just
Look at Siegfried and Roy.
yeah.
They
But
trained those cats from the time they were little, and just out of the blue, bang.
There you go.
but that's the inherent risk, and most people with any common sense know that, and they understand that. And you get some idiots that, oh, I just want to own a tiger, and generally those are the ones that get their face peeled off because they don't, do what they're supposed to do. But even then, the people who take the most care, like Siegfried and Roy, who have done it forever, things happen.
Hmm.
So most people that do this kind of stuff, just like we do when we go out in the woods, we know the risk, we understand the risk, we take as much precaution as we can. But at the end of the day, this is still whatever you believe is your thing to believe. Y'all know me. I believe it's an animal. It's still a wild animal, and it could decide at any time it's having a bad day and it wants to tear my head off.
And we've said it many times. Me and Robbie have talked about it. If you take the cryptid completely out of the equation, there are still things in the woods that will kill and hurt you. You know, you've got
Mhm.
bears, you've got mountain lions, you've got wild dogs, you've got wolves, you've got, bobcats, you've got coyotes, snakes. There are all kinds of animals that can and will hurt you. Not to mention the greater North American meth head. If you stumble up on an illegal grow or a meth lab in the woods, humans are very, very dangerous. So if you're going to be out there, you need to be prepared to not necessarily defend yourself from something major, but to at least protect yourself.
Right. I wholeheartedly agree. And like I said, that's one of the goals of our film is to spark debate and raise awareness. You need to be aware. Just don't go into the woods just lollygagging and loot de doo de doo, and there's nothing ever going to harm me, because there's things out there that they have to kill to survive.
Right.
Yeah, that's what they do.
And that's another thing that I do like about your work, Greg, is you don't put it out there as, hey, this is what this is, and I said this. You're like, look, here's what we got.
Mm-hmm.
You make your own choice and your own decision. It's like we were talking about last night when I showed you the picture of our print. I just said, here, look at this, and you're
Mm-hmm.
like, see, that's exactly how I present stuff too. I'll let you make your own determination about what that was. Just like you do with your videos and your documentaries, you present it and let people make their own determination. You're not trying to sell your bill of goods. You're just putting out what you see and letting people make their own determination about it, which is what we do here. We have our own opinions, but we don't try to push them on people.
Right.
And we're just like, okay, this is here. You have your opinion too. This is what we think about it. If you agree, fine. If you don't agree, fine.
Right.
That's something I've always liked about your work and about your ethic and about the way you are, and I think that's why you fit so good with us misfits.
Well, I don't think there's any experts in this field. I think I have more questions than anybody, and we just happen to carry a camera along with us. We carry a camera, and we do get enough experience to know a few tricks and things to look for, and when to film and when not to, and when to stay home. Other than the experience, I don't have any more knowledge than anybody else, because I don't know what these things are. I have no clue. I have, some of the footage that we have where I have as many questions as anybody else does. There's something there in our footage. Now, one of the things I do know that is there in our footage is that orb. It's there, but I don't know what it is. It's a ball of light.
Yeah.
It stayed there with us all night. I don't know what that thing is.
But you said it though, Greg. There's nobody that knows the answers to this stuff.
No, there's not. If anybody claims that, you better turn around and go the other way.
Snake oil.
Exactly.
So that's what they're selling. And that, like I said, I think that's why we've all, ever since we met, we've all just had that, you included, we all have that, we don't necessarily have the exact same 100% agreeing theories on every single thing, but we all have that open-mindedness to say, you know what, if you believe this, that's great. I'm not disputing it, because what I say may not be right.
Yeah, it would not surprise me at all if Bigfoot was nothing but just a flesh and blood human being and nothing more. Okay, that would not surprise me at all. It would also not surprise me at all if there was this woo factor in there, and then it had the ability to cloak or go into a different dimension or whatever it does to disappear, and that maybe they live outside of our dimension or something, into a different reality or another dimension, whatever you want to call it. That wouldn't surprise me. I really don't know what these things are. I just keep an open mind to everything.
Yeah, and that's what we always try to to put down is just because we here are in the, we hated it, but we're in the flesh and blood camp just because that's all we've seen as evidence is to go in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
Because everything.
I'm not saying the other's impossible. It's just less probable.
And here's the thing, and you know this as well as anybody else, Greg, because in your job you have to investigate things too.
Mm-hmm.
You start at point A, and then your next stop is point Z, and then point Z is wrong. Where do you go from there?
There is nowhere else to go.
Exactly. So if you can't argue that point Z is right and point Z is proven wrong, you have nowhere else to go. But if you start at A and then you work to B and then you work to C and you go on and on and on, and you eliminate everything in between A and Z, then when you get to Z, okay, that makes sense.
It's kind of like working a crime scene. If you go to a crime scene and you look around and you go, "Yep, demons." Yeah,
demons did it. That's it.
Yep, you're going to be peeing in a cup, and your credibility as an investigator is now gone.
Going to be shot.
Yeah. Now, if you go through every hoop imaginable and rule everything possible out, and then go, hell, I don't know, maybe it was demons. I've ruled all of this out. Even your other investigators go, yeah, I don't know what the hell else it could be either. We've literally ruled everything physical out. But until you have, when you just go, it was aliens, yeah, you lose all credibility. You will absolutely lose 100% of credibility if you have not eliminated all the possibilities along the way.
Yeah, you've got to go through a process. You know, you've got to let the evidence take you to where the evidence goes.
Right.
You know, you don't go, where you want the evidence to go.
Yeah.
Or just go where the evidence goes.
Yeah, you've got to make your theories fit the evidence, not the evidence fit your theories.
Yeah,
exactly.
You walk into a crime scene, like DA said, and somebody's obviously been killed with a gunshot wound, and you're like, all right, we're looking for a knife.
Huh? Right.
Why are we looking for a knife exactly? Well, because he was stabbed. Can't you see it? Yeah, I see that big
stabbed
bullet
with a bullet.
Yeah, he was stabbed with a bullet. You got
or maybe it was a voodoo doll,
Yeah, just a big needle.
We're looking for a voodoo doll.
Somebody stuck him with a straw like a giant Capri Sun.
Exactly.
And he popped out the back just like the bag was blew up too much. But it's the same principle. I mean, you have to look at this. You have to look at what is presented in front of you. Let's say a trackway that just stops. I love arguing this one because I argued this one with a certain person who, once I put my theory to it, he just couldn't argue anymore. He just completely stopped and sat and pouted. He was like, well, you can't explain that. I'm like, yeah, I can. He said, how? And I said, backtracking. And I started explaining, explaining, all right, if you're walking forwards, what's your primary point of impact? And he looked at me like, what? I said, what part of your foot hits the ground first? Well, your heel. Yeah, okay. So if you're backtracking, which part of your foot would hit first? Well, I guess the front part of your foot. Okay, yeah, right.
The pressure ridges are going to bear that out.
So if your heel hits first and it drives into the ground and then it pulls off the ground this way, what's going to be stuck to the bottom of your foot? He goes, well, whatever you're walking in. I said, dirt, sand, rocks, whatever, right? Yeah. I said, well, which way is that going to come out off the track? He says, it's going to go to the front. I said, uh-huh. So if you're backtracking into the tracks you just made, where's that disbursement going to be? He said, towards the back. I said, so in any of these trackways that you've ever talked about, have you ever went down and looked in the track to see if any of that stuff is? Well, no. I said, then how can you say it's not backtracking? He was like,
yeah.
Now I'm not saying 100% that that's what it was,
but it's a possibility.
But it's a possibility.
But when you look at likelihoods, it is far more likely that something backtracked over its tracks than it is that it just popped into another dimension. And I'm not saying it couldn't. I'm not saying portals don't exist. Never said any of that. We know from a fact that CERN has opened portals, so we know portals are a thing. But where else in the animal kingdom do portals pop up when an animal's trying to get away from you?
I
Nowhere
don't
that I know
know.
of.
I do know NASA has come out and said that every 9 minutes or so, a natural portal opens up on Earth. So they have sent satellites up to study the portals. So and it's almost on a pattern every 9 minutes. Where they go is a different question, but or how you access these portals, different question. But portals is one thing, but is a Bigfoot disappearing out? I've had trackways stop, but I can't say that they jumped into another dimension. All I know is that they stopped. That's
Right.
all I know.
And with any trail of evidence, your theories have got to be the most logical explanation, because anything else is just a disservice to your investigation. It just sheds it loses your credibility on the entire scope of your investigation. Now, I'm not saying through process of elimination you can't wind up there anyway, but you've got to eliminate the most logical solutions first.
Yeah, you have to be logical in the way you present things. And, if you're illogical or outlandish and you just jump to conclusions, then, you're not going to have any credibility in this. You have to have credibility in order to, it depends on what, your goal is. If you're trying to persuade people, I'm not necessarily trying to persuade people. I'm just trying to raise awareness and, open the discussion on skepticism, and try to turn people's thinking back from the government schools way of thinking. They're telling you there's nothing else but this. What we tell you is in these books.
Right.
I'm trying to turn people away from that and say, hey, look, our past is complicated. I think there were civilizations here long ago that's been wiped out for various reasons, one reason or another, and that they were technologically advanced.
We know the ancient Egyptians were far more technologically advanced than we gave them credit for. They had battery technology.
Yeah,
why did they need batteries?
Absolutely.
How have we not been able to figure out how they built the pyramids?
We still haven't.
Exactly.
And they didn't drag those big giant blocks across sand. I'm sorry. They didn't put them on trees to roll them. I'm sorry. No, they didn't. It would crush the trees instantly. And
they did that because they were smarter than us.
Yeah, exactly.
They knew something we don't.
I just don't think the Egyptians did. I think they're older than the Egyptians.
Could very well be.
The Sphinx is clearly, if you really start looking at it, I think it's clearly wasn't supposed to have been a human head. I think it was a lion's head, and later it was transformed into a human head.
Explain why the head is so much smaller than the rest of the body.
It's disproportional, so I actually really think that whatever built those pyramids there was long ago. So I'm not convinced that the Egyptians did it, because if they did, then their technology regressed. That's typically not what technology does.
Well, answer me this, Greg. What happens when you make a copy of a cassette? And I know cassette tapes are not a thing anymore.
A copy of a copy of a copy. Things tend to regress. Yeah, it tends to degrade.
What are we?
We're copies.
We're copies of copies of copies of copies. So, yeah, as much as people don't want to admit it, as much as it hurts people's feelings, we're not our technology is based on computers and how dependent and reliant we are on computers.
Mhm.
We as a human race are not as smart as and as creative and as inventive as we were back then.
Yeah, absolutely not. You know, 5,000 years ago, somebody proved that the world was round with a stick. You know, he stuck a stick in the ground on a equinox day or something in one part of the world, and then another part of the world, did the same thing, measured the shadows, and it turns out to be an arc. The difference between them, it's exact same time of the day, and blah blah blah. So then he was within like 1% of the circumference of the Earth. I'm like, he did that with a stick. I mean,
think about the Vikings. Think about the Vikings of navigating with the sunstone. How did they figure that out?
Mm-hmm. So, their level of understanding of the Earth and the nature, and it was just phenomenal. We don't come close to understanding any of that today. All of our, like you said, all of our technology now is what I say technology based. It's based on computers.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And we've talked about this before. Think about where we were technologically from before World War I to the beginning of World War II, then from the end of World War II to now.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the jump in technology.
Big jump.
From there to there's no way we should be like from the time that we put somebody on the moon. It took there's more computing power right here in my hand than what put the rocket on the moon. And it was in, what we say, DA, a 3-story building,
something like that. Yeah.
So this is able to do 300 times more computing power than the computers they used to put somebody on the moon, and we hold it in our hand. There's no way that you look at from that time frame to this. How is that possible? And why have we not gone back to the moon since then?
No, that's a different question and all. But
that's a different show.
It is a different show. But I think that kind of goes back to the things that I know about.
Yeah, I mean,
I would agree.
It's just when you really look at it and break it down, there's so much in this world that we don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
And you can use this for cryptids, you can use it for aliens and UFOs, you can use it for paranormal, ghosts, orbs, whatever you want to talk about. How the pyramids were made, Stonehenge, Easter Island, any of it. You can throw this all in the ring. If you draw a circle on the ground, that big around, and you say this represents all the knowledge in the known universe, how much of this circle would what you know take up?
What I know, it'd be less than a pinhead.
Would it even register inside the circle? So how in the world can any of us say that this doesn't exist, or this is not possible, or that's not possible? We can't.
Yeah. You have to keep an open mind. Absolutely. And shows like this is I think it's very good for society because it keeps us talking. It keeps information flowing. Not one person knows everything. Somebody over here might have a really good hypothesis about something, and then maybe it inspires somebody over here, and then maybe they're able to test their hypotheses independently and come up with exact same results, turning it into a theory. And it just these shows like this are just phenomenal. Yeah, another one I love to watch. I love Jessica's show. I always kid her. I call her the Duchess. The cryptid Duchess, but she's a cryptid cryptid huntress. But she has some phenomenal shows. Where she does the remote viewing, and I love watching her stuff. There's lots of shows that I'm finding myself that this technology has allowed us to convey, our experiences and keep this dialogue open. And I think it's extremely important to keep dialogue open.
Yeah, there's just so many. There's way more questions than there is answers.
Exactly.
And I think that if you stop asking questions because you think you've got the answers, then that's when
you stop growing.
Yeah.
When you stop asking questions is the time you stop growing.
Exactly.
Well, I'm sure DA has heard this because I heard it when I was a young pup getting into law enforcement some 28 years ago. My dad looked at me and said, because he retired after 40 years in the field. He said, I don't care how long you stay in it. I don't care how much you think you know. The minute you start thinking that you know everything, that's when you need to hang it up because you're about to get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Same thing applies to this. The minute you think you know all the answers and you've got everything, you've got it all figured out, that's when you're going to do the greatest harm to yourself or somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I will say this. I mean, because we kept an open mind and because we observed everything, from afar, so to speak, this rabbit hole that we jumped in has just not only has it gotten deeper, but has branched off into, multiple directions, and there's so many directions that you can go to investigate this or that or whatever. It would take 100 lifetimes for somebody to investigate all these rabbit holes.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, the world is very strange. It is very, very strange. And for one, I'm glad that I was actually awakened, and I'm not asleep anymore.
Yeah. And like I said, it's a discredit if you go around saying that you have all the answers and how you know that what you believe is 100%. You can't do that. I mean,
right?
Because I don't sound like a broken record, but there's just so much in this world that we don't know and don't understand. I mean, it's like Taylor said earlier. We've only explored 5% of the ocean. We've only explored 10% of the cave system, of the Mammoth Cave system. How do we know what is in those caves? How do we know what is or isn't in the ocean? We don't. So people that drive me up the wall and say, well, the megalodon is extinct. How do you know? How do you know? And these people that say, well, this is how this animal looked and this is how this animal lived. How do you know? Did you ever witness it?
Their best guess.
Exactly. But you won't hear them say that.
Even with paleontology, with dinosaurs, it is their best guess of what what these animals looked like and behaved like, because we don't have living specimens to study. All we have is, and especially in cases when it's something where we don't have hard data to prove it by, all we have is theory. And the same thing applies to the cryptid field. All we have is theory. And I've said it many times, and I'm going to say it again. There are no experts in this field.
Absolutely. There are none anywhere. If you've been in this a while and you don't come to the conclusion that you don't know anything, you're doing something wrong.
I'm learning stuff all the time.
Exactly.
I know that there's way more out there that I'll probably never know.
Exactly. My point exactly. If you're doing this and you haven't come to the conclusion that you don't know anything, then you're doing something wrong.
I agree. Well, boys, it's after 10. We've had an awesome show. We need to mention our affiliates and start winding things up. Greg, you can stick around if you want, or if you need to go, that's fine. We're just going to be talking about our affiliate programs and paying the bills, kind of, so to speak. But thank you so much for hanging out with us. I know it was short notice that you jumped in. Appreciate you coming in and sharing stories and talking about your work and your documentaries. And dude, it's been a pleasure. We need to have you back much sooner.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
Yep.
Appreciate it, sir.
And thank you again for the hospitality last night.
You're welcome. Anytime, Robbie.
Greg
Anytime.
was a lifesaver after I got my tail beat in Anniston, Alabama this week in cold weather and running jackhammers and sawzalls and all kinds of other stuff. And I was exhausted and couldn't drive back. So Greg graciously let me stay at his house last night so I could get a restful night of sleep and drive myself back home today.
He got to recharge his batteries.
Yeah, and I needed it.
It's a pleasure having you, Robbie.
Thanks, sir.
Thanks for having me on.
Corey Cole said it. He says, the world ain't what it seems, is it, Gunny? The minute think you got it figured out, you're wrong. That was from the movie, what was that movie, Shooter?
Yep. Yeah,
when he was talking to Levon Helms. Yep. Yeah, Levon Helms. That's a great scene.
I love that
movie. You got it figured out, you're wrong.
That's right.
Well, Greg, thank you again, man. Oh, 3D Havoc just celebrated 7 months as a Wild Hunt member. Hey, man, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Well, one of our sponsors is the good folks over at Dark Angel Medical, and I happen to have a video of little old Doc.
Let's hear the little fella.
Here with us. Since he couldn't be with us tonight, we'll just we'll hear from Doc himself. How about that?
Hey, everybody, this is Kerry Pocket Doc Davis from Dark Angel Medical, and you are listening to DA Ex Machina with D.A. Roberts. You may recognize me or some of my products from Dark Angel Medical in some of the Apex Predator, Lakeview Man, and Wild Hunt books, and you can get those products at www.darkangelmedical.com, along with training classes on how to use those products and save a life. Shoot us an email at info@darkangelmedical.com and be the difference.
And if you go over to darkangelmedical.com, don't forget to use discount code CRYPTID25 for 25% off your order. All orders are HSA and FSA eligible, as well as the classes that they teach on how to use these kits, which are the best in the business. I carried one throughout my law enforcement career, and I can't imagine trusting my life to any other kit. I still carry them today. So head over to Dark Angel Medical. Again, use discount code CRYPTID25 for 25% off your order. And don't forget to put codename Wild Hunt or Operation Team Odin or codename Wild Hunt in the notes to get a little Team Odin rocker on your kit. Robbie, you want to tell us a little bit about Scallywag Tactical?
Yep, Scallywag Tactical is another one of our affiliates, and if you get your Dark Angel Medical kit, you're going to need it when you get one of these because as DA and I will both tell you, these knives are very sharp. They will cut you 3 ways: long, deep, and continuous. Doc loves to say that.
They will.
And they will because DA and I are members of an exclusive club. As far as I know, me and him are the only 2 members of cutting ourselves with these knives on air.
Yeah, I peeled myself pretty good with one.
Didn't say we were the smartest or the brightest bulbs in the box. But we're in the box, so that says something. Counts for something. Anyway, I digress. Scallywag makes some of the best folders, fixed blades, kitchen knives, camp knives, fillet knives, just any kind of knife or any kind of blade that you could possibly want or need. Craig can hook you up. I think that's the Razor folder.
Mm-hmm.
This is the Jolly Roger. Now, if you read the books and you're a fan of the books, which you should be if you're on this page, you've heard this knife mentioned. You've heard the Privateer mentioned. I just got that knife. I carry that one on my the DA's holding up the karambit. I carry that on my body armor as my oh crap weapon. If I'm in the middle of something, somebody's got me down trying to get my gun for me, that's what they're going to have to deal with. But I think I've got that once I got the karambit, I think that was blade number 6 for me from Scallywag, and I wouldn't take anything for any of them. They are great knives, and that's the gunner's mate with a little something extra on it. And DA's got that one. Is that full grind? Is that what that one's called?
Yeah, I think so.
And I've got the one that's got where you can see the silver on the grind on it. I think it's a hollow grind. They're just amazing blades. I mean, anything that you could possibly, even a fantasy blade, and I call it a fantasy blade, but the boarding axe. I mean, you can use it as a camp axe. You can use it as a zombie apocalypse weapon if you wanted to, because it will definitely take out some zombie skulls. But like I said, they're in the books for a reason. They're in the books because that would definitely penetrate the skull of a zombie, and it's sharp as a razor too.
Yes, it is.
And it's got it. I actually got to hold it when I was at DA's house, so it's balanced and weighted really all those knives are. They're really hefty, but they're balanced really well, and that's a big thing in a knife. If you get a big, bulky, heavy blade and it's not balanced right, it just feels awful. But I have yet to put a Scallywag blade in my hand that has not just felt almost perfect. So head on over to Scallywag. Have they got the blim section back up, DA?
Don't know if it's back up because they just got rid of a whole bunch of stuff at the year's end. But I do know that there are going to be a bunch of new knives available this year, and I think there's a few already available. So
he usually has a section called Blemish Blades. That's where he sells a lot of stuff that, like, if a crate of boxes or knife boxes falls over and the box gets broke, or there's a little scratch on the blade or something like that, they'll put that on there. That's just a little way to get a little extra, little bit of money off the knife. But even so, he started kind of throwing some specials out there. So when you go over and check it out, hit code DA Roberts 10 at the checkout, and I'll give you an extra 10% off. He's got some big sales going on, and like DA said, there's a bunch of other knives coming out eventually, or over the next course of the next few months, maybe the year. I don't know what the time frame is, but he's got new blades coming out
throughout 2024. There's going to be a lot of new stuff introduced.
So he's probably trying to make room for some of the newer stuff. So he's kind of dropping some prices on the older stuff, probably some stuff that's going to maybe go by the wayside. So if there's one that you've kind of been looking at, and you see the price dropping, you might want to go ahead and jump on it, because that may be a chance that it's going away. I know that there was talk about the Orca going away. There was talk about the Dew Claw going away. I don't know if they actually have yet, but
this is one of their rock whiskey tumblers.
Yeah, they've even got that stuff like that. Got bottle openers. They've got whiskey container. I think they got hip flask,
coffee grinder, and a French press coffee maker.
Yeah. So I mean, they've got shirts. They've got all kinds of stuff. So I don't know what numbers I need to bump up at. You totally lost me on that one. I don't know what
numbers of knives. I don't know.
Anyway, let me know what numbers I need to bump up, and I'll work on that. Anyway, like I said, hit code DA Roberts 10 at checkout. Get yourself an extra 10% off the order, and tell them we sent you.
And our other affiliate, let me swap that over, is Ken Brock over at brockblades.com. Ken's a retired law enforcement officer. He makes all his blades custom in the shop behind his house. Makes some fantastic blades. Whereas all the Scallywag blades are fantastic blades, they are mass produced. If you get two of the gunner's mates and put them right beside each other, Other than possibly the grind, they're going to be a little different. There's going to be next to no difference between them. Now, every blade Ken makes is going to be unique because they're all made completely by hand. The handles are going to be different. The blade shape's going to be different. The final design is going to be different. And you can custom order blades through brockblades.com to your specifications. Ken is a heck of a good guy. He's usually in the chat, but he makes all his blades by hand. And if you've got somebody that's in your life that's a first responder or an outdoorsman or a veteran, the gift of a custom made blade is something that'll be deeply treasured. And these are not something that are designed to be looked at on a shelf. These are very practical, very sharp knives, and he stands behind his blades. So, if you want to get a gift for somebody something that they'll always remember, a custom blade is something I would definitely keep in mind. But keep in mind brockblades.com and check them out. Make sure you use discount code Cryptid10 for 10% off your order. And if you do order a custom blade, make sure you mention that you heard about brockblades.com here from DAX Machina, and he'll make sure that you get your 10% off even on the custom orders. Got anything to add to that, Robbie?
I think you hit all the points. Ed said that there's still nothing on the blemish blade section for the Scallywag thing, so I guess he's making room. So
yeah, I'd say he's making room. They were clearing out a lot of blades from their inventory to make room for new stuff for this year. And there's been some surveys over on the Scallywag Facebook page where they've been asking about different stuff, and I've been throwing my 2 cents worth in. So hopefully we'll be seeing some really interesting stuff from them this year. Which kind of leads us to the portion of where we kind of wind things down. I talk about a subject that's very near and dear to my heart, the 22 a Day Foundation. 22 a Day and the Till Valhalla Project are working with veterans to end veteran suicide. We lose 22 veterans a day to suicide, and that is 22 too many. And I just picked this up from tillvalhalla.com. I don't know if you can see it, but it says 22 a day on it. The proceeds from the sale of these all go to help veterans with therapy, get them therapy dogs. All of the money goes to veterans. With a lot of these bigger charities, if you donate $100, you'd be lucky if $1 of that actually makes it to the veterans. About 95% of everything that taken in by Till Valhalla Project goes to veterans charities. And I'm very proud to be a supporter of the Till Valhalla Project. 22 a day is too many people to lose. We need to get that number down to 0. And that's not just veterans. We're losing first responders, not just line of duty deaths, but suicide is a high number among law enforcement and first responders because they see and experience things that, well, the human mind ain't always wired to handle. I know in my career, I saw some pretty horrific things. I know Robbie's seen some horrific things, and those things can stick with you. So your first responder friends and veteran friends and people that reach out to them. Just let them know you're thinking about them, because you never know when that hey, are you okay text in the middle of the night might be what pulls them back off the edge. So reach out to your folks. Reach out to the people that mean something to you. The veterans, the first responders, anybody that served in uniform. See if they're okay, because there's a very good chance they may not be. Because sometimes the people you least suspect are the ones that are struggling with the most demons. I buried too many friends under flags, and I hope that the next funeral I attend with a folding flag will be my own. We don't really want to go to any more. I've gone to too many, and I hope that my friends out there that are struggling with things. Remember that there are those of us that are willing to listen, and that there are avenues for help. So if you're a veteran or you're a first responder and you're struggling, reach out to somebody. Don't be too proud to reach out. I know it's not easy to do. I had to do it myself. Sometimes you just need a little bit of help to get through. You're not afraid to call for backup when the fight gets ugly. This is just a different kind of fight. And don't be afraid to call for that backup. And those of you who haven't been there, reach out to your first responder friends. You know, because again, like I said, you never know when that text might be what pulls them back off the edge. But as we wind down, I want to close the show with a toast. We've been doing it for a while now, and it's something I want to continue. There's an old Irish drinking song called "The Parting Glass," and "The Parting Glass" is a beautiful song, and it's played in Irish pubs all over the world at the end of night when people are lifting their final glass and heading home. But if you read the lyrics, you listen to the song, it's talking about more than that. It's talking about raising a glass to those that aren't with us anymore. My toast is going to be just a small portion of that song. I think you should definitely go on YouTube and listen to the song. But we'll close it out with this toast. But since it fell into my lot that I should rise and you should not, I'll gently rise and softly call. Good night and joy be to you all. Good night, everybody.
Thank you for joining us. Catch us again Wednesdays and Saturdays on DAX Machina. A special thanks to all our channel members and Patreon supporters. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe.